Okay, we're back again here at allpointstv.com. Glad you're here. And we'll be here for the next hour. And we are doing a taping of the program, which will air while I'm out of the country, but we're not going to leave you high and dry. We're going to make sure we have some programs that will air, uh, that will take up the slack, so to speak. And we hope you will get something out of this conversation today. We're doing some, I'm going to close the conversations we've had for the last two segments. We've been doing a post-mortem on the assassination of John F. Kennedy, and I'm doing a post-mortem really on the so-called investigation of the murder, because I don't think that this murder was investigated by the Warren Commission. And if that's an investigation, if that's the best we can do, we're really are in trouble in this country. They can't do any better than that, because for them to be able to find the things they claim they found as conclusive in that event, the 35th president of the United States being assassinated in Dallas, if they claim that that was a conclusive investigation, then we're in trouble. If that's the best the government can do, then we're in trouble, because it is very clear that some of the the main conclusion that they made, that this was an assassination that was carried out by one person, and you just simply threw it out the one at the very beginning, because there is obviously shots from the front of that limousine and also from the back of the limousine, and I think the evidence is very clear. I don't have to think about it. I know the evidence is very clear. There was more than one shooter, just by the fact that what they told us the weapon was that was used, because John, the one of the technicians in the studio, has that 6.5 Italian Cacano Manager rifle, and I think he'll testify to the fact you cannot get 3 shots off with that weapon. Cannot be. I've seen some experts try to duplicate it, set it up the way it would have been played out in Dallas. There's one guy that is known for his prowess as a sniper, and they had him to try it, and he couldn't do it. And this guy is a marksman. And Oswald, really, in the Marine Corps, was basically a pencil pusher. He was not even involved in firing a weapon as part of his job in the military.
Yeah, but the Marine Corps, I'm not correct, but I don't know if you knew this. They train every Marine to first on the rifle. That no matter what you go into, that's your first training.
That's right. You're right. You're exactly right. I should have. You're right. I should have said.
He was just the basic. He would be like the basic level performer on that. He wasn't extraordinary. He was a marksman. He hit the target. Yeah.
I'm aware of that, and I misspoke. I should have said this. In trying to determine the level and the job assignment best suited to the talents that the person had, Oswald was not considered good enough to have been an infantryman, having a responsibility with weapons. His job in the Marine Corps was mostly that of a pencil pusher, and that was because of the training that John was alluding to. The training was such that they had determined his aptitude was better suited for this line of work rather than another line of work. But it was not like he was in there constantly dealing with weapons and sighting weapons and things of that sort. And really, I think that John will verify this in terms of the Malica rifle. Every time it is fired, it has to be recited so as to get the hairs correct again. And what's that book that's written about it called 6 Seconds in Dallas? And you can't get off with that weapon. You cannot get off no 3 shots with that kind of accuracy in 6 seconds. After 6 seconds, this thing is over.
I couldn't even dry fire, which means just not even putting a round in the chamber. You just you pull the back, you get to the trigger set, so you can actually If you had a round in the chamber, it could actually go off. I couldn't even dry fire it that many times in that period of time, much less aiming at a moving target, an obscure moving target, because they had live oak trees in the center, and live oak trees, which means live oak trees don't shed all their leaves. That's what it means. Until way late, they'll always have a remnant of their. So you're moving, and also when I'm making a turn and all this on the street, you're aiming that distance. No way with that gun. No,
can't do it. And you have that weapon, so you are much more aware of it than I am. I'm not a weapons guy, but I just understand the report, the Warren Commission report, and I've read the persons that have come against that report with their own findings, and what the Warren Commission did. I'm convinced what they did is that they had a conclusion, and they made the evidence fit the conclusion that already come up with, and that was not to find a conspiracy involved, because they convinced them, and I think there was some patriotism involved in it, because they convinced them that if there's conspiracy, they'd made them believe the conspiracy was outside the country. I mean, who could have believed it was inside the country at this point? We were so starry-eyed as a nation, and all of this that you learn in school about the country is this and the country is the other thing. Who could have gone with the idea that there was an internal problem that would have taken the president's life, where we have internal problems here that would have caused the death of a president, particularly one who seemingly was as popular as John F. Kennedy was. And so it was just it played into an environment, but I don't think that there was an investigation. I think what they did was to come with the conclusion there was no conspiracy, because they thought that if that was the conclusion, it would lead to a thermonuclear exchange between. They thought it might have come out of the failed Bay of Pigs invasion, and that would have pitted therefore the Russians, who were Cuba being a satellite of Russia, it would have pitted the United States up against Russia, and we would have had a much larger conflict, and that would have been if it had been a nuclear conflict. And there were a lot of people saying that the Cuban Missile Crisis would have launched a nuclear war. That's what I can remember very well. In Birmingham, people were preparing that. Some people were saying they walked off their job, because if this is gonna be it, if this is gonna be Armageddon, they're not gonna be on their job and died. They went home thinking this was if this is gonna be a nuclear war, there's no sense in being at work on your last day. And some left their jobs all over the country because they expected that. I remember the tension in the air at that point in '62 during the Cuban Missile Crisis. So so some of them, I'm sure, that they thought they were doing a patriotic duty by concluding what had already been concluded, that Oswald had acted alone in the assassination of John F. Kennedy. That was the conclusion that they were pushing, almost at the point of the capture of Oswald in that theater. And I would tell you, the evidence is very clear. They had already determined. They already had the passing line up, because you cannot see if they saw Oswald in that window, and Oswald was not on that window. He was not even on that floor. That much the evidence is very clear about. Oswald was not on the 6th floor of the school book depository. He was on the 2nd floor in that cafeteria. But he's in that building, though, and I think that building that he was in shows that he was a passee, and also it shows of why that motorcade route was in fact changed. People don't know that the motorcade route was in fact changed from what it had been. When I read this book by Jesse Ventura, They Killed Our President, and he lists 63 reasons to believe there was a conspiracy to assassinate JFK. The frustration I had in reading the book was that the chapter that he has one chapter that says the I think it's chapter 11. Let's see, is that 11? Let me see which one of those chapters is it that talks about the route being changed. The frustration, I know the route was changed, but the frustration reading that chapter in Ventura's book is that he doesn't talk about what the original route was. If I could have, if I don't know what the original route was, I just know what route they took. I know it went off of Main Street to Houston and Houston to Ames, and I can tell you a lot of things about why that was a violation of the Secret Service rules and regulations, because you're not to take a turn that's more than a right angle, and that's like this and then that. This idea of a curving kind of turning that slows the vehicle down, that's a total violation. And they make sure that when they route the president's, any person that has to be given security, you make sure in the planning of the route that those turns that will slow that vehicle down or make it turn in certain ways in which it cannot go at the speed, at a certain speed, so that it can be clocked by anyone that has an intent to do harm. You want to make sure that you're not giving them a target that makes it easy for them to carry out the incident that they intend to create. And when you see that car going down Main and then turning on Houston and then turning onto Am Street, and then at Ames, it's got to make a turn. It's not a U-turn, but it's close to it. I mean, it's a circle turn right in that little area of where that building, the sixth floor building is. And what I find interesting about the turn is that turn puts that vehicle right under that window where that shooter, where Oswald was supposed to be perched on the sixth floor of that building, because that turn is at that building. That building is on Ames and Houston Street. And that shot is not taken. And that just shows, you see, some of my conclusions are conjectural, and I will point them out as being conjectural. But some of them are not conjectural. They are based exactly upon the evidence. There's no doubt about the fact there's a conspiracy involved. There's no question about that. There's no doubt about the fact there's more than one shooter in Dealey Plaza at this point. And I think there are two teams of shooters. That's conjectural on my part, but I think there are two teams of shooters in Dealey Plaza. And I think that there is a part of a team that's on the sixth floor. I don't think that is not Oswald up there on the sixth floor. I think that's Malcolm Wallace up there, and that person is tied into Lyndon Johnson. I think that Roger Stone's book is very good in this regard. Roger Stone is being dismissed as somewhat of a flake, a character as a flake. This man's not a flake. This man did some very serious research and writing about that in his book. And Stone's book is very, very important. And I think he's right about the Malcolm Wallace aspect to it. I think that's one. There's a team that Wallace is part of, and I think that team is is on the sixth floor. And there's also part of that team. And that when I say a team, I'm talking about a shooter and a spotter. So we're talking about 2 or 3 persons on the sixth floor of the school book depository, and then the other part of that team is in the front. And I think that team is over on the left side, based on where I've seen where I think the shooting is coming from. See, there are two grassy knolls. There's one on the right side. I think that's where the kill shot. But there's also a grassy knoll on that left side, and I think that's where the first shot that we see the president reacting to, that shot is in the front and over to the left, and that the bullet that Kennedy is reacting to that hits the president's throat. That has to be a low caliber weapon. Must have been maybe even a silencer being used, but That bullet never came out of the president's body. That idea that was a shot in the back, and that came out of the president's throat, and then did all this acrobatic stuff there to hit Connally and put 7 different wounds in Connally's body. You can talk that stuff to person who have not looked at the evidence. Those who looked at it know that that acrobatic shot, that magic bullet they talk about, no bullet can do that. And there was no suspension of the laws of physics in Dallas on that day. The laws of gravity didn't change just during that 6 seconds that murder had occurred. There are multiple shooters in Dallas. I'll put my life on the line on that conclusion, and I'll put my life on the line that this is definitely a conspiracy, and that Oswald didn't shoot anybody that day. In fact, I think the evidence is very clear that Oswald, who did not know that he was set up, because you have to have when you plot these these military type operations, you have to have figured out how you're going to set up the shot, where you be located, and then how do you extract the shooter from the environment so that the person that pulls it off is not caught at the scene. You have to have that figured out ahead of time. You also would put in place and have in place the person who would be the patsy, the one who's going to be blamed for the incident, because the people doing the shooting don't intend to get caught or even be found that they were in that area and doing the shooting. So they have to figure out what the extraction point is, and also they have to have a patsy in place because somebody did it. You can't go about not finding somebody at fault because of the event. And so they have to have the extraction plan out after the shooting, and they have to have a person in place that's a patsy that can be blamed for it, and so on and so forth. And I think that's what Oswald was. Lee Harvey Oswald would say later on that he was a patsy, and he was a patsy. Oswald was. Here are my conjecture and conclusion. Lee Harvey Oswald was supposed to have been killed on his way to that theater, and I don't know if he got spooked, but what he did, he got on a bus and took the bus. He didn't have a car. He didn't have a car, so he got a ride to work every day. But he got on the bus and he went to the rooming house where he was, where Mrs. Payne owned the home. He and Oswald and his wife Marina was staying at, and he went there to get that pistol he had, because he's now beginning to see that, and this is a conjectural point, that something that he's beginning to see some of the things into what had been going on is now making sense to him now. And he's going to that theater to meet his controller. This is not conjecture here, because Oswald had a controller in the CIA, because Oswald was working for the CIA. That much is very clear as well. Oswald was I don't know if you would call him a CIA agent, or maybe you would call him a CIA, what would be the word for it? Some type of, he's not like working full time. He's like an asset, a CIA asset. He's getting a salary, they're paying him things like that, and there's certain it's like the gopher type of a role, where he's going here and going there. And sometimes you'll see him going into places where there was an Oswald double. And you'll see, like in New Orleans, where there were two Oswalds. And then the day they showed up at the embassy in in New Orleans, for some reason the camera wasn't working that day, but they knew who they. Both sides know, they know who goes in those embassies every day because they got cameras on those embassies all the time. That day when Oswald went there, they didn't have the cameras weren't working. So I don't. It could have been Oswald, or it could have been a double, because Oswald had a double, and that shows me again that they were pulling his coattail in this direction, that direction, because they had a patsy in Dallas, just like they had a patsy in Chicago, had a patsy in Florida, because they were stalking this president. They were stalking John F. Kennedy. And any place where the opportunity presented itself, that's where the hit was going to be made. Now Chicago was taken out of it because Chicago was too close to home of where Nicoletti was and where Janet Rosselli was. These are the ones that actually did the shooting in Dallas. I think that I don't have to think about this one. I know this is where Nicoletti was. Nicoletti was in that Daltex building, probably on the third floor, and that would be a much better place. A professional shooter would not be on a person that has really professional expertise would not have been on the sixth floor. That would be an amateurish type of thing because of the different problems you create for your firing. But yeah, there's that you have a more amateurish type thing there. But the expert would not have chosen that sixth floor because number one, you're shooting downward, and you have to have a better you have to have an idea of the gravity issue and all of that, and a lot more complication in the calculations are involved, and that's a more difficult situation. A better place to be where I'm saying here that that the part of the team, two persons are in the Dow Tex building. There's a spotter there. Johnny Rosselli was a spotter, and Charles Nicoletti was a shooter. That much I'm willing to put money on that's true. And I think that in the grass and knoll, that's part of the other part of that team. That's where the kill shot occurred. Now, in the book by Jesse Ventura, he claims that there probably were as many as 9 bullets that were fired. Certainly 6 or more bullets. I can account for, let's see, how many can I account for? There is a shot 5 inches below the nape of the president in his back. That bullet never came out of the president's body. That's one shot. There's a shot in the president's throat. That shot's from the front. And the doctors at Parkland Hospital, before they did the tracheotomy, all the ones that saw that wound saw it as a entry wound, and it was an entry wound because if it's an exit wound, it takes other matter with it as the bullet is beginning to tumble because it's hitting bones and things like that. The bullet is tumbling, and by tumbling, it's going to be a larger wound as it exits the body. But that bullet does not exit out of the president's body. That bullet, you see the president in frame 210 or so in the Zapruder film. There's a person there that went down at the dressmaker, Abraham Zapruder, went to film the motorcade just to get it on record. He wanted to show his grandchild, according to the reports. They was there when the president visited Dallas, and that film they took is crucial to understanding what occurred there because we see in around frame 210, between frame 210 and 213, you see the president's doing this. He doesn't do this now. He does this. You see his arms go up like this, and that bullet is going into the president's throat. If it hit him in the back, which would have been the first part, he would been the pain in that area, he would have done that and reacted this later. But he reacted to that shot that gone in the president's throat, and that's consistent with those doctors who saw that shot, who saw that wound of that shot, and they all said the same thing. These people are very good in terms of wounds because they're dealing with what doctor has not seen a gunshot when you have these Dodge City type cities, and Dallas was like that. Dallas was another Dodge City. They're very they're very familiar with gunshots because the people are shooting all the time in all these large cities, and so they all said the same thing. It was an entry wound, and then when they did the tracheotomy later on, and people did not know that saw it later did not know that was first of all a wound that had been enlarged because they put this. The president was having problems breathing. They wanted to make his breathing a little easier, and that's when they did that tracheotomy. But they expanded that wound that already been made, and put that trachea instrument in the president's throat to help to clear up his breathing and make it a little easier for the president to breathe, because the president was really the president was basically dead, but he still death is is lingering. Your death is not, you get shot and then boom, you're dead and all your vitals are gone instantaneously. Sometimes I noticed when they were doing Dr. Death, he would this guy they call Dr. Death down there, he would give people something that would end their life, because someone was saying that it'd be better for them if they took something that would be like a suicide, but the idea is that they're terminal, and if they were going to die through the natural, they would have a problem breathing, and it would be suffocating and suffering, and they didn't want to go through that. So Dr. Kevorkian was his name, Dr. Death they called him. It was assisted suicide. The man was claiming that he was on a mission of mercy, and he was saying that your society is uncivilized if it does not have access to that. Persons whose death is a point of mercy, because the suffering would be such, and people couldn't take that. But you talk to these old people, they understood it because they understood the conditions they were in. You're young, you see that as this guy is actually involved in murder. Dr. Kevorkian was trying to show that a civilized society would have something in it that allows the suffering to end. You do it for the horses and animals. They break their leg. These race horses and stuff like that, they're not any good anymore, and they have them crippled around and carrying all that weight on 3 legs rather than 4, and have that's the suffering of those animals. They put those animals to sleep as an act of mercy, and that's what Kevorkian was in fact doing. So, but the point I'm trying to make here is that you have to look at it from a number of different angles in terms of looking at conspiracy. I see conspiracy in every aspect of it. I see it in terms of them claiming that Oswald was in that window, and you can't tell who's in that window. Not from a distance, not when you're looking at from a distance, and then you're not paying attention to that window. You're looking at the motorcade. So you may have glanced up there and saw somebody up there, but to say that was Oswald and they're sure of that, and you never had seen the person before, you don't have that kind of accuracy. They had an image of who they were looking for, the height, the weight, all of those little particulars you would have if you had a chance to really study the profile of the person. They had all that in place. They were saying we're looking for a person that weighs this much, that this height, Oswald's height, had that down to a science. And you cannot do that looking from the outside of that building at that window and then get all of those measurements in place because number one, he's not standing up. He's crouched down. That window's not up to his height. That window is down here, and he's down here at an angle, a very, very poor angle to fire that shot. But they know the measurements of the man and things like that. That's one part of the how I know there was conspiracy, by the fact that they had that patsy in place. And Oswald was a patsy. He said he was a patsy, and he was a patsy. And I would say this as well. They intended to kill Oswald. Oswald was not supposed to make it to that theater. And they knew he was on the way to that theater because his controller, yeah, he had a controller in the CIA. His controller was, and you can check this out, his controller was David Adley Phillips. And David Adley Phillips was the CIA director of the Latin American affairs. And he was a controller for Lee Harvey Oswald, and he's also the controller for the person in the grassy knoll. And the person in grassy knoll was James Fowles, who also changed his name to James Fowles when he got married, but who was born in 1942, James Sutton. That's a shooter in the grassy knoll. You can take that to the bank. And he's been told not in that area that he's in, those in that on that third floor. I think it's the third floor. I couldn't see a second. It's not on the. It's not. It's either the it's between the second and fourth floor. I think it's the third floor, but it's certainly no higher than that shooter in the Dow Tex building is on the, I think, the third floor of that building. And that team, two persons that were there, John Rosselli is there, but he's not the shooter, he's a spotter. And he does not want to be involved in the shooting because his controller, his CIA controller had sent him there into Dallas to call this assassination off. That's a fact. They had sent a team into Dallas that day to call this thing off. They had changed their mind about the assassination of John F. Kennedy, but it was too late. In the works of that event, it had gone too far. And the only one at that point that could have called it off was Tony Accardo and Sam Giancana. Sam Giancana was the one you probably know from the person that was dating one of the McGuire sisters. And he's going to have a problem later on because that was putting too much glare. This guy become more of a Frank Sinatra type person out front. And I'm not saying he was a singer. I'm saying he was public. He was a public person, and that was bringing too much glare and things like that. He became a liability at a certain point. And there are a lot of things that happened to him. He was hit in 1965, I think it was, either 65 or 67. But the only one that could have called off at that point, at that late time, was Tony Accardo and Sam Giancana. They could have it was already in place, and the mafia was going to hit Kennedy because Kennedy they thought from their vantage point that Kennedy had betrayed them in terms of the Bay of Pigs invasion that occurred in 1962. They thought he had in fact betrayed them by not giving them cover for the going into Cuba and taking Castro out of power. That's why they call him Kennedy a traitor, by the way, because this thing was that Castro was 90 miles off the coast of Florida, right in our wheelhouse. He's violating the 1823 Monroe Doctrine, which was this our sphere of influence. The whole Western Hemisphere was our sphere of influence, and there was Russia in Cuba by way of the invitation of Castro, and we have these communists now that close, and Kennedy not doing anything about it. He's under tremendous pressure. And I'll tell you a book you got to read. There's a great book that's been written. It's now been kind of taken off the shelf and not suppressed, but just people don't talk about it. Go read Edward Crankshaw's book. The Memoirs is called Khrushchev Remembers. That's a very good book. But what it establishes that the Kennedys were under tremendous pressure. I think that there was a threat of John F. Kennedy, indirect threat on John F. Kennedy, in 4 days before he was murdered. Because in them putting pressure on Kennedy to do something, who was that person went into the Oval Office with a machine gun to show him that his security was such. A guy brought a machine gun into the White House and showed it to John F. Kennedy. And John F. Kennedy, this has not been reported, but John F. Kennedy saw that for what it was. He was asking, this was a threat. It was showing John F. Kennedy that the security around him was such. But they were determined to get him to act upon that threat they saw of those missiles in Cuba, because those missiles have been by satellite, they've been shown by satellite that there were missiles in Cuba. And having those missiles that close to a superpower like that, that's unconscionable. And it's also unconscionable for the United States to have missiles that close to Russia, and that's also unconscionable. You cannot have these surrogate countries, the lesser endowed and things of that sort, running a surrogate mission and threatening superpowers that have nuclear weapons, because that's intolerable, because those lesser countries can start something and ignite something that the larger powers have to pay for. And they should not put the superpowers in a place like that. And it was calmed down in 1962. They've given this was, I can remember that time. This was getting ready to hit off into a nuclear confrontation. The country was, I mean, all those drills you do in school, that was kind of like the kindergarten kind of stuff. But it was a real problem going on. They're trying to tell you in school that if this happens, get on your desk and put your hand over your head, give me a break. But there was a real problem in terms of this tension that was going on. You felt the tension in the air. I remember as a child feeling it as a teenager. It was tremendous tension in the air. Is this going to be the day? Planes over, you were thinking planes coming over the air. You out there playing baseball. You didn't know, but you had a feeling that something was really to hit, because there was so much tension. And they had leaders in Kennedy had the leadership to resist the military-industrial complex that Eisenhower had told the country about. On the 17th of January of 1961, January 17th of that year, just 3 days before he left office, that's when he gave that speech everybody knows about, called the military-industrial complex. He should have known, because he's one of the ones that helped to create the atmosphere for that. Because they had planned to go into Cuba if he had been, if his vice president Richard Nixon had won that election, they were going to go into Cuba militarily. That was going to happen. That plan was put in the works on Dwight D. Eisenhower, but Dwight D. Eisenhower's vice president Richard Nixon did not win the election or let me put it this way, he won the election, but they took it from him and put Kennedy in there. And Kennedy used a mob in order to bring that about, expecting that if he got in there, then there would be some residual returns on the turning the election and Nixon in Kennedy's favor against Nixon. And it's like pay to play. And they expected something out of rigging that election, to which Kennedy would be chosen the winner by 100,000 votes or less. But that election in 1960, everybody now knows it, was in fact stolen. The mob, in fact, caused that election to go in the Kennedy's direction because his father was connected to the mob. The Kennedy family was. So that's another factor involved in it. We're talking about conspiracy here because the mob had swung the election in Kennedy's favor, and they were expecting something out of it. And then the Pentagon, Curtis LeMay, and those generals, they were putting pressure on Kennedy, and really, in a way, threatening Kennedy, because the idea was that if this man allows those missiles that close to the shores of the United States, then he's the commander-in-chief. He's not doing what the commander-in-chief should be doing, because the commander-in-chief must, in fact, demand, in fact, militarily confront those missiles. First, strike them before they strike here. Get them before they get to homeland was the kind of idea. And Kennedy was not going to be pulled into a first strike type of thing. They considered this to be, they considered Kennedy to be involved. This was treasonous on the way they saw it. And Cranshaw's book, Khrushchev Remembers, must be, that book, nobody talks about that book. That book needs to be read, because the Kennedys were under tremendous pressure to do something. And they thought themselves that they could not ward off this nuclear war. And Bobby Kennedy was saying, and they call us human beings, because they knew what this amounted to. This is going to amount to a nuclear war. Once you start a nuclear war, it cannot be stopped. It cannot be stopped, because you don't know if the other guy will stop. If you stop firing your weapons, how you know the other guy's going to stop? Once it starts, it cannot be stopped. That's why you don't want to start. And you had you had both sides trying to find a way to get out of it. For example, Khrushchev on the Russian side, what they did is that they knew that satellites were picking up everything they were doing, all the movements they were making, things like that. Anything that looked like it was militarily getting ready to launch some things off and that kind of thing. They were watching to see what they were going to do. What Khrushchev did was take his whole government to the opera that day. Let them see that they're going to go to an opera event, and then that sent a signal that certainly not that day, that threat is not going to kick off, because why would the whole government pretty much be going to an opera if they have a military thing that's getting ready to plan? That began to tone things down, gave them a little bit more time. And then this deal was made. Didn't announce to the American people, but what they saw was that Kennedy was going to they're going to quarantine Cuba, surrounded with gunboats and things like that, and put a quarantine around it. They saw that part, but they didn't see the negotiation that was going on. That the agreement was that Russia would pull its missiles out of Cuba, and they were only there in Cuba because the U.S. had tried to invade Cuba, and Cuba then allowed them to put those military that military arsenal in Cuba as a way of warding off any future plans to invade that island 90 miles off the coast of Florida. He wanted to, in fact, ensure that would not happen. At the same time, by bringing those missiles in there is very provocative. And if those missiles are not moved, then you got to confront those missiles there. You cannot allow those missiles that close to a superpower like the United States was and is today. Would not be tolerated. But understand the other person's interests. You have those same missiles in Turkey, in certain parts of Europe, Eastern Europe, and that's just unpalatable to Russia as it is to United States. They have the missiles in Cuba. It's the same proximity issue for both sides, and they worked it out. Didn't announce to the American people. They saw as a candidate standing down Khrushchev, but both sides had to stand down, and that's how negotiations work. Both sides must get something out of the negotiation. Otherwise, you're not negotiating; you're being dictated to. And when national security is involved, you cannot afford dictatorship in the negotiation. Both sides have to, in fact, give in something to the other person's interests, and that's what they did. The idea was pull the missiles out of Cuba, and then pull them out of those places in which the missiles were there threatening the national security of Russia. And by doing that, those tensions went down, and we avoided what would have amounted to World War III. And we don't want World War III, because World War III is going to make World War II like a cakewalk. And you don't want that. You want level heads there. And that's what Donald Trump, to his great credit, was trying to tell this. Don't get me talking about this man. I don't have the same view of him that they have here in the United States. But Zelensky's they're trying to act like this man is another Churchill. This man is a thug. And the only person that really I listen to about him, because I know I look at it too. The only person I listen to about him and about Ukraine and about the war that's going on between Ukraine and Russia, the only person I listen to is Jeffrey Sachs of Columbia University. He's the person, the most clear-eyed commentator that's out there. The rest of these persons, there's a couple of others. John Mersheimer from University of Chicago is very good.
I hate to brag a little bit, but you've basically picked up, pointing out, though, Jeffrey Sachs and I had real similar views on the whole war in Iraq and Afghanistan and all this other stuff, and the war in Israel and Ukraine. We pretty much on the same line,
Yeah.
I mean, that's when I heard what he said, I went, that's what I've been saying.
Yeah. I was surprised, John. I wasn't surprised that you had already contacted that information and had that view. But Jeffrey Sachs was I came late to that party. I try to listen to everybody, and I'm doing some studying too, so I'm trying to put into context where I am with what they're talking about based on things that I've done too. I don't have to depend totally upon other people, because I do research as well. But I was impressed with Jeffrey Sachs. I think he's the most honest figure that's out there, and I have come to rely upon him for his understanding of things going on in the eastern part of Europe. I can trust him because I think that he's a square shooter. He's not taking these partisan sides and going to see it through a lens that's biased because he's on this side and not on that side. He tries to cut it down the middle, and I try to listen to those who do that. And I have a lot of confidence he's that kind of a straight shooter. So I listen to what Sachs is saying more than the others. But some of them that you just don't, you overhear is Russia, 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 and all that. I can't listen to people like that, because no one side can be 100% right all the time. And so those that show that they will say this when this is right, or when there's evidence that points out this position is the correct one, and then when that evidence changes and it shows this side is not right, and they're willing to say that, I can go along with a person that would do that.
Especially when Putin during that Carlson, his Tucker Carlson's interview, he laid it out why they're so angry. It's like you're about to ringing Russia with NATO-aligned countries or trying to increase the number of countries. He laid it out. I mean, you just alluded to the Cuban Missile Crisis of '62. we were mad because we had one group of them pointing at us from 90 miles away. Russia's getting ringed by these countries, and people don't realize that the European nations are not these huge, massive things. They're so far apart. There's like states within the United States. They're like so close together. That's what they are. And you get more and more states now linking and have connection to NATO. They are going to be overwhelmed. They don't want to join this globalist crap. They don't. No, Russia does not want to be part of this globalist. They don't want to have to take populations from other parts of the world into their mix. They don't. That's one of the big reasons. They don't. They want to resist that. And I think everybody should.
Yeah, John. If Biden had been in there, we would have been one step closer to a war, because this man, it's hard to even imagine this man being president of the United States. And he was president because of the fact that he was, in fact, given that presidency by some of the shenanigans that this country has in its past. We don't have honest elections in this country. This is the myth that all of us have been trained into. I may not get to my other topic, which was I was going to talk today about. Is my topic number 2. I was going to talk about the judicial review, which I want to go into that because that's another thing we have to discuss. Because I would tell you I don't agree with these scholars on this point. They've accepted this. I don't accept it, and they're going to listen to what I say about it because I'm just going to tell you they're not on this level in terms of when I hear them talking about constitutional scholars. I don't consider them that. I consider them television. They're television scholars that talk about the Constitution, but they're not constitutional scholars, not what the stuff that they're saying. And I can't believe they accepted judicial review as constitutional. I'm going to tell you, it'll be in another segment. Won't be in this segment here. I won't have enough time for it. But it will not be in agreement with them talking about judicial review. I'm going to show you that judicial review is unconstitutional. That's my plan. That was my plan for today. But we'll get to it. We'll get to it in the next segment. We'll deal with that next week. I want you to tune that in because that conversation is going to be one that not only scholars are going to agree with me on that, but they better not come out here publicly and disagree with it, which they're not going to do because they're not qualified to do it. If they think they're qualified and they're not even they can't even get impeachment right. I haven't heard one of the scholars yet on TV talk about none of them. Not Alan Dershowitz, not Mark Levine. I don't hear them. What they're saying about it is totally nonsense. That's all of them. I keep trying to hear which one will get that part right. I don't hear any of them getting that part right. And they certainly, and I'm not surprised that they have accepted judicial review as constitutional. I'm going to show you next week in our discussion about it that judicial review is the unconstitutionality of judicial review is accepted 100%. But I'm telling you that what I'm going to point out is the unconstitutionality of that when I get around to it. But I want to finish this conversation up first, and that is that the conspiracy. See, there's no doubt about the fact that there's conspiracy in Dallas. There's no question about that. That part you can just put that to bed. We can no longer debate that. We can debate whether or not it was a cover up for patriotic reasons. We can debate that. Were these 7 members on the Warren Commission doing a patriotic duty by warding off what they thought that another conclusion would have led to? That we can debate that. Was it patriotism, or were these guys just a bunch of government charlatans that was going to cover up a crime of the president of the United States and cover up the murder of the leader of the free world? And they cover that crime up because they were corrupt. You can debate that. Was it corruption on their part, or was it something else that kicked in that made them go to the wrong conclusion? Because there's no way in the world that they're going to tell me the bullet can be doing all the hopping around that bullet did. They call the magic bullet, which was All Inspector's nonsense. The guy that later on become the senator from Pennsylvania, and that bullet hopping around, and when you see the way that bullet had to act, you could see that look. Don't embarrass the American people with that kind of insanity. The bullet cannot do that, and you cannot say that the bullet acted differently in that environment in Dallas than it would have acted in another environment. The laws of physics don't change according to what city it is in, and so that bullet could not have done that. And this idea of one single bullet doing all that wounding of two figures and then being pristine and that at the end, and that bullet was pristine and all the rest. That's a different bullet, by the way. That bullet was put on the stretcher of the president's body. That the person put that on there wanted to make sure that he retained the evidence. He put it on there, but that bullet was the one that was fired from the front. Another bullet fired from the front that went into the cushion of that limousine. That was some shooting from the front. There's no doubt about the fact that some shooting from the front. And if there's a shooting from the front and shooting from the back, that in of itself, 6 seconds in Dallas, that 6 seconds show you can't run. I mean, this is not flash over there. The shooting in the back of that limousine, two shooters in the back in two different buildings, and then two shooters in the front on two different sides. So there's no place for the president to go. If he backs up, once the shooting starts, he's in the line of fire. If he goes forward, he's in the line of fire. That's a military operation. And they figured out the extraction points. That's why nobody was caught in Delhi in Delhi Plaza where that shooting occurred. They did not catch the killer there. And they had no evidence really that would have convicted Lee Harvey Oswald if they had carried that case to the trial, because there's no evidence that Oswald fired a shot that day. The paraffin, they have not reported the paraffin test. If he had fired a rifle, the paraffin test would have shown some nitrates had been fired the weapon and so on. They did a paraffin test on Oswald, and the paraffin test came back negative. The only nitrates that Oswald had was in his hand, and that's because he had been on the firing range when when James Files was firing and was in fact sighting those weapons and things like that. Oswald was there with James Files and picking up those bullets as he was firing to sight those weapons in. He didn't know yet what they didn't talk about the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Oswald didn't know James Files was going to be part of that part of the team shooting at the president. He didn't know that, because you see, and you set these things up, you don't know if they get caught or not. If they know too much, they could turn other things around and turn you in and come and implicate other parts of the setup. So you don't want them to have a need to know type of thing. That's why I said last week that the two teams in Delhi Plaza didn't know each other. Didn't know about each other. They knew their assignment, what they were supposed to do, and what they were there to do. And the other team that was there, this was the mafia group, and they had Nicoletti was part of it, and Files was not part of the mafia, but he was around the mob group. He had done certain things for the mob, and they used him on certain things because of his military background. He was Well, let's say what he was. He was a trained killer. They don't want to deal with Fowles' admission of being in Dealey Plaza, but he was there, and they knew he was there because, and I think this is another conjectural point. They knew he was there because what they were able to do was look at who was in town, and then you check the registry of the hotels around the area, and you find out who was in those who came to town, and then after the assignment had been carried out, who left. And they knew James Fowles was there. James Fowles was tied into Charles Nicoletti and to an extent Johnny Rosselli, and they saw that on the 22nd, he'd gone there a week before, but on the 22nd he was there, and on the 23rd he's gone. They put things together like that. Fowles didn't even know that they knew he was in town, but they knew he was in town because the controller knew he was in town, because his controller was a director of the CIA. I'm telling you that Lee Harvey Oswald and James Fowles had the same controller, and the controller was David Atlee Phillips. Atlee Phillips was a CIA director of the Latin American affairs, and he was the controller for both of these men. They had that's why they converge on that theater and turn those lights up. And there's Oswald in that theater because Oswald is on there to meet his controller. They had planned. This is a conjectural point here, but they had planned to kill Oswald because he's going to be the fall guy. They're going to kill him and shut his mouth up. But now that they did not kill him, I don't know if Lee Harvey Oswald got spooked and went a different route to the theater or what, but they didn't get him on his way there. The person that killed J.D. Tippit in that vicinity where the theater was, I've seen a picture of the guy who did that. I've seen his picture. That's not Lee Harvey Oswald. Oswald did not kill Tippit, and he did not kill JFK. He did not fire a weapon that day. That's a fact. But those officers knew. They knew ahead of time that was the person they were looking for. And one of them says when they had them stop the movie and then turn the lights up, and one of them said, "Kill the president, huh?" Like that. They had their man. They had the patsy. And that's what Oswald was. Oswald was a patsy, the one that's going to be the fall guy for that event. People will not. I think the person puts it together better than anyone else, but not all of this. What I'm saying, he's putting together. But the one that I have a lot of respect for in this domain is this person named Jefferson Morley. I have a lot of respect for him. I think he's honest. I'm for honesty. I think he's honest. I don't think he has. His thing is look at the documents, and he knows there's a conspiracy. He knows that much is clear. There's no doubt about that. So he knows that, but he doesn't necessarily put the field work together. He's looking at the documents, that which they had redacted all these years. For 62 years, they had redacted these documents. And now that they have done some unredacting of the documents, he's now able to see certain connecting points. He knows Oswald. He knows that Oswald was. He knows that Oswald didn't do any shooting. What he knows is that Oswald did not fire the shot that ended John F. Kennedy's life. He knows that. he might not know that James Files had been told by Nicoletti and the ones that were controlling Nicoletti, they wanted the shots from the back. They wanted those shots. They didn't want those shots coming from the front. They wanted those shots coming from the back. That team did. That front shot was another team, but the one that Nicoletti was on, they wanted those shots from the back. That's where those three bullets on the sixth floor of the school book depository, those bullets were planted. That was that team was the one that had the shots coming from the back, because that team was the one. They didn't know why they wanted the shots coming from the back. They've been told they wanted all the firing from the back, and they had the shots coming from the back. That's where the framing of Oswald was, because you can't have shooters from the front and back. The one that was in the front that did the shooting, and that's James Files, who shot at the same time that Nicoletti shot, because they were looking for a headshot. And the idea was that James Files was not to shoot unless necessary, if he had not been killed by the time he got up to Elm Street, where Files was, in that grassy knoll, and he had not had a headshot. That's why two bullets, you'll see it in that Zapruder film, two bullets hit the president at the same time. Two bullets hit him at the same time. That's why the president does this, goes forward, and that second bullet came right behind the eye of the president and blew the back side, the back part of his head out. There's a big gaping hole in the president's back of the president's head from that shot. Two bullets hitting him simultaneously, 1,000 apart was the way would be my counting of it. Conspiracy, no doubt about it. Oswald did not do it, and we have a faulty report right now that has to be corrected in terms of what really happened in Dallas, and we're still trying to unravel that onion. Okay, that's the last word I have to say on the assassination. Conspiracy, Oswald, no, not involved in it. Patsy, yes, and then the killers got away. They were brought to trial. Okay, got to get out of here again. Next week we'll be talking about the judicial review, and I'll go into that, and we're going to take some exception to what the scholars are saying about that, and so on. I'm going to clean it up next week. Until next week, I want you to follow your dream. If you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.